Welcome to the podcast number 7. Our guest today is Usama Khan. He is a bona fide entrepreneur and someone who has deep expertise in the startup world. He has sort of done a complete circle in that, he has started a startup with the name of Meri Taaleem, and he worked on that for a couple of years and then he had to call it quits. We will talk about it, but then he was one of the founders of the famous Facebook group Pakistan Startups, and later on he went on to work as a consultant helping startups, and he's been very involved in helping and writing and talking about startups. And right now he is part of a hot startup in North America, Hopin, which is in virtual event space, and he is in product management there. So it's a very interesting story, and I'm very happy and excited to talk to finally be able to talk to Usama Khan. Usama, thank you very much, and welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Okay, so let's just get started because I have a lot of questions for you.
Mhm.
Talk a little about, you graduated from NUST and you were at NUST in between 2007 and 2011. And we have heard that, NUST is being ranked in top two universities in terms of computer science talent consistently. We see in the rankings, it's either LUMS or NUST for computer science talent. And recently, that Yasir Bashir of RBSoft, he did a little bit of study. He published that study of the CS students that they get for their company, and NUST was in top two. So talk a little about your experience and what is it that NUST is doing right that they are on top consistently.
Sure. So I started off obviously studying at NUST, but my program was not purely in computer science. It was a combination or a hybrid of sorts with IT and telecom engineering. The program itself was called Information and Communication Systems Engineering. The name itself should tell you that it's like a amalgam of sorts. So what it was good for is the fact that it gave me a well-rounded experience. I got to know basics about three fields actually. One was obviously IT, computer science, software engineering. The other one was electronics engineering, and the third one was telecom engineering. So the basic principles of all of that really prepared me well for following any of the three disciplines. And the good thing about our program was the fact that the people who graduated from our program could pursue career in either of these three fields, and that's exactly what happened. So that's why most of my batchmates, most of the people I know, my seniors, my juniors, they are working in different types of fields, and they have their own career paths. It's not like when you think about think about a university and a program that people coming out of this program will have a particular career trajectory of sorts and they will only go in one domain. That wasn't the case in this program. So it was very, very good. Where it lacked was the fact that it only sort of prepared us to become the jack of all trades, but not really a master. So, for example, when I wanted to go on and interview for programming positions, I wasn't really good enough of a programmer or developer because I only had like one or two courses in my program. So, due to that, I mean, obviously, a lot of my batchmates did eventually become programmers and they end up going on and working for big companies as programmers, as developers. But obviously, I followed a different career path. So, that's the good thing about the program. That what I would say about NUST is the fact that it's one of the good universities in the sense that it has all the resources that you need, and because of its brand name, because of its size, and because of its value in the education sector, it attracts the top faculty. So that's the best part. I think a lot of what we have become as Nustians is attributed to our faculty members. When I joined NUST, the good thing there was that we actually right then and there shifted onto that big H12 campus, which is now renowned all over the world and whatnot. And we were one of the pioneer batches who started studying in that, this new facility. And because of its size, obviously, they increased the number of intake and whatnot, and they immediately needed faculty members. And what happened as a result was that the top PhD scholars who were returning home ended up joining NUST. So we actually got to study from the people who were very fresh. They were not outdated, they were not old in their ways, or their education had not become redundant, which I think partly is responsible for the contribution. I think one other person I would like to mention is the person who was heading SEEKs at that time, which was my college as part of NUST, Dr. Arshad. So Dr. Arshad is a known face across the IT industry and education industry, and he has been an avid supporter. He is more of a operational you know amazing talent retainer person, or whatever you want to call it. But it's basically his USP was that he brought the best of the best people to his institution, and that's how I think we got a lot of opportunity. We got a lot of exposure as part of just studying there, and I think that just ingrained in us this ability to succeed. The second part, I think, partly is that usually there is this notion of lumps being that all party and enjoyous and enjoyable sort of a place to study. NUST is considered as the extreme opposite of that. Like it's always studies, 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 and that's actually partly true. It was all about studies, at least when I was there. And then obviously over the years it has improved a lot. There's a lot more focus on extracurriculars now than it was when I was studying there. But now I think it has become really well-rounded place of sorts, where I think another thing that contributes to their success is the fact that they only attract the top of the top. Their merit list is so high that it's so hard for a normal person with normal grades to just get into. And I think one thing good that happens is that even if you are a top scorer in some board, does not guarantee your spot in NUST, because NUST has another way of testing it, or testing your ability as part of their entrance test examination. That is why I think we've seen well-rounded people from A levels, from like in my case, I was a federal board graduate, and we see that distribution across the spectrum. So it's not like only the top scorers from local educational boards will actually get a chance to study there. It's a diverse spread of sorts. So that's actually, I think, also partly why NUST has, like, in the first place, they're getting the top of the country, and then they're obviously grooming them to actually excel afterwards as well.
And that's wonderful. I mean, that's definitely, they must be doing a lot of things right, and it really helps if you have the top talent, if you can attract the top talent to your institute as well. So, I mean, I read about you. I read your article on pro Pakistani, and you mentioned that in the final year there was a course about entrepreneurship offered by someone, Mr. Lodhi, there, and talk about that, because it's sort of unique in that time, because we were studying at that time. Rarely universities had a course on entrepreneurship back then. Now it's quite a norm, but back then, and would you say that Mr. Lodhi was sort of responsible, or who got you into this sort of space, in entrepreneurial space, where you sort of you saw it was not all bed of roses? So was Mr. Lodhi the culprit?
Yeah, I think I would agree there, for sure. And I think also, like I mentioned, Dr. Arshad before, he was responsible for introducing this course as part of our regular studies in our final year. And I think it's, in hindsight, when we thought about studying it at that stage, we were like, why are we studying entrepreneurship? Like, we get our degrees to go on and do a job and have a normal corporate career, right? So why are we told to study about entrepreneurship and all of that, especially at the final year, where we should actually be telling, the university should be telling us how to prepare for interviews, how to clear those assessments and whatnot, and how to get a good job, blah, blah, blah. But lo and behold, we were, asked to take this course. This was mandatory for everyone. But I think as part of this, the difference was that it wasn't taught by a university professor. Mohsin Lodhi is like successful for himself, and he is well known. And these days, he's delivering, like, trainings on inspiration, leadership, management, and whatnot. But I think when we got to learn entrepreneurship basics from someone who was an entrepreneur himself, that really helped us in shaping up our narrative about what entrepreneurship is, what startups mean. Definitely what was inspiring about it. That's why I think I got pushed into this direction. But interestingly, I did not start my entrepreneurship journey right after graduation. I actually ended up getting a job, just like normal people would. So I worked in Lahore in a company for about 5 months before I call it quits. And I think the actual trigger for me launching in my startup direction was the Lean Startup event that you and I also met at. I think that was the trigger because I was like, I if I can do this and if I can actually, um, you know, I can see myself doing it, then why should I wait? I have the opportunity right now to do it. I might not get the same opportunity 10 years down the road, so might not give, why not give it a shot right now? So I think that was the trigger. But yes, I would still say Mohsen Lodhi for sure was the inspiration.
And I was it so happens that for the audience, let me just say that when I was researching about Osama Khan and reading up on him, whatever was available online, I found out that he and I were part of that Lean Startup event in 2011 that happened in Lahore. Trevor Owens from Lean Startup Machine came to Lahore, and we had that event, and I was working at Park Wheels Confiz at that time, and my company sort of paid for our event, and I'm so glad they did. And thank you, Raza Saeed, if you are listening. It was wonderful. And in that event, Usama Khan, I remember that probably your startup idea came number one. Is that right? Because I remember clearly you guys brought in a written agreement from some university that they will buy your services whenever your startup will be ready. Talk a little about that, and talk a little about your mindset back then, and who else helped you in making that decision? Was Trevor Owens also talk to you personally later on, or other people and your team? How did that materialize into an actual startup?
So interestingly, the idea was by someone else attending that event. I'm forgetting the name, but basically we worked together. This was a fast Lahore student who came in with this idea that, hey, I see the students getting admission in the university facing a lot of problems. So we should create an online place for them to go on and apply for admissions and everything else, right? So, but when I got to hear the idea from him, I could see that as a potential issue. And I think why it related or resonated more with me was the fact that um, my father is a university professor. So I have actually, and one, he's a university professor, and two, I have actually lived on university campuses for most part of my life. So even at times, I remember when I was little and I was in school, I used to, like in summer holidays or some other time, I would be just, after school or sometime like that, I will be going on and basically sitting in my father's office because he will be asking me, okay, just do your thing, and I'm also working and something like that. And they used to students who come in um, and discuss their problems with him, right? So that used to happen in front of me. And that became a repeated pattern of sorts where I could see that a lot of students who came in did not really wanted to pursue the career that they ended up studying. And that's like a nationwide problem we still have. But I think that was like, it was even more rampant back then because the information was not easily accessible as it is today. So that was also like when this person mentioned this idea, and I said, yeah, there's, sure, applying for admissions is one problem, but then career counseling or lack of career counseling rather is another. Because I used to see my father doing it and saying, hey, now you're here, now you're studying in this, you have two options: either you can quit or just accept it, right? So why don't you try and accept it and move on, because that's what you are here. Like whatever happened and what led you here is something else, but you now have the opportunity to either continue or just stop and take a fresh start, right? What do you want to do? And then obviously people at that stage, it's difficult for a Pakistani kid studying in a university to say or go on and challenge his or her parents that, no, I don't want to study this discipline and I like something else, and all of that, right? It's still something that's coming difficultly to us, mostly because of the fact that our parents are paying for education and our well-being and everything else, right? So um, I think that's why it just became like an idea that I thought could materialize into something actionable, right as part of that event. And over that event, I think one more person I would like to mention is Sajjad Kirmani, who's the CEO of Infogistic. At that time, he was either almost, he was, almost done with NetSol, or he was actually probably his final months at NetSol. But he's been a director there for so long, and he had worked with Salim Wari and all these people, and then he was helping us out. So obviously with someone with decades of experience, they share that wisdom, right? So he helped a lot in refining that idea over the duration of that event. And it was a weekend event, and towards the end of that event we ended up realizing that yeah, it's something tangible. We have figured out all the kinks, and we feel like it can become something different, right? I think that was the trigger for me. I realized that there's a huge opportunity there. I would admit that yes, the main reasons for following that dream was to one, of course, the glamour that you get being a startup entrepreneur, successful startup entrepreneur. The money, the fame, the everything else that comes with it. So that was like one dream or one goal. But the other goal was much more relatable because, like I said, I had seen my childhood while growing up and following, seeing people following different career paths that they had no idea about, and then suffering later on. So I thought this is something that also is serving a social cause, as well as in the process there seems to be an opportunity to make money. So why not give it a shot? So I think that was the trigger, and I still remember when that event got over. The very next weekend, I went back to Islamabad and I spoke to my parents and I said, "Hey, this is like something that I want to do, and yes, I'm in a job and the job is going fine and everything else, but I feel like I can do it right now." And I remember my father was very encouraging, and he was like, "Look, you know best what you want to do, and I'm here to support you. I just hope that what you do helps you in being successful, and that's all I care about. So if it's okay if you want to take the lead, I'll support you as long as I can." And that was, I think, the the nail in the coffin, I would say. And then I eventually ended up, the next week when I went back to my job, I ended up resigning, and they were very surprised because they didn't expect it, and they tried to make me stop, to just stay in that job for a long time. But I had decided, and I wanted to quit, and that's what I did. So I came back home. I still remember the only thing I got was I finished that month, so I only had like my last month's salary available to me as the startup fund of sorts, right? And with that fund, I also, I think I was also um, fortunate enough to, for example, count on the things that I was living with my parents. I didn't have any out of pocket expenses like that. I ended up setting up an office in NUST Technology Incubation Center, which was free of cost for NUSTians or NUST graduates. So that's why I think a lot of that also, like, when there is a will, there is a way sort of a thing happened. So a lot of those things started connecting together. But I did not start my startup journey so as far as Meri Taaleem is concerned right then and there, because I realized to build that bigger thing, I needed more funds. And with my last month's salary, which was, I still remember, about 30,000 rupees, I wouldn't be able to pull off a big project like that. So I needed funding, I needed investment, and I knew that I had to work towards it. And in the meantime, I wanted to keep myself afloat, pay my bills and everything else, right? So I ended up starting a services company. And again, I thought like this would be a smaller project that would at least keep us afloat. And then eventually it will take me to launch this startup as well at some point, or at least give us enough insight or knowledge or whatever, or resources even, that we can actually do that exercise. So that's how I ended up starting. And from that point on, one step after another, it's a long journey that happened over, I would say, the next 4 years, or 3 to 4 years. But it was a very good one. I learned a lot. I think a lot of what I do today or what I know today is as a result of that journey, because it has shaped me to become the person I am. And if you ask me to go back in time and would I change things? I think I wouldn't. I think the learning was, um, even though I had to call it quits and Mediterranean did not become successful, but the learning I got as a result was much more precious, which has set me
Yeah.
up for life. So that's the good part.
Yeah, yeah. Looking at your profile, I mean, I obviously at that time, I will get your, your comment on that time. At that time, it must have been very difficult in some of the moments when you were struggling, and on the face of it, for you and for some of the people around you, it must have felt failure back then. But looking at your profile now, I can see a wealth of experience that you went through. You raised funding, and that is an experience. You raised funding twice. You got help from incubators like Invest to Innovate, and you had you lived that experience, and you wrote about that as well, and you got. I believe your masters in Sweden through that experience, because back then it was rare to find entrepreneurs who had done it at that time, in early years of Pakistani ecosystem. And but and your experience became for the world out there. It was, and it still is, a very wealthy experience. It's a very rich experience that a lot of people value, and talk a little about that. Definitely in hindsight, you can say it, I can tell you, the whole world can tell you, it's an enriching experience, and it's something which is invaluable. And you must have been getting sort of opportunities based on that experience, even now, and your life will ever be enriched because of that. But go back in those years, what was the experience like, and what were the emotional roller coaster ride that you were going through, and what are the lessons that you can tell to the young entrepreneurs who are listening out there, and talk about the short term and the long term regarding to that.
Sure, sure. I think it was a combination of sorts, and like you said, it was definitely an emotional roller coaster ride. When I started off, obviously, when you start something new, you are all excited about it, all geared up, all passionate, and that's what happened with me. Obviously, I wanted to change the world of sorts, right? And especially this is the time when there wasn't enough that existed on startups and startups in Pakistan in general, for example. So there were only a few players talking about startups and what that means. And oddly enough, in Islamabad, there only used to be the Indus Entrepreneurs Islamabad chapter that used to talk about it. And that was pretty much it. Like we did not have any incubators. We did not have, like, the only incubator that even we had in NUST was like the Technology Incubation Center, which also was supporting not really startups, but people who had a proven model already. So they weren't really at that time their program was not as well defined as it is today. Like now they have learned from their experience, they have improved their program, they know what to do, how to connect people, what are the paths to take and whatnot. But this is like the early days of Technology Incubation Center where they did not know what was going on. It was just two or three corporate oriented people who were running it, who had no idea about what startup and entrepreneurship generally is. And obviously they were not connected to that ecosystem as well. So obviously, when while it really helped in giving me a start, it definitely lacked in other areas where I had to find those resources, find those mentors, find that guidance, find everything that I needed to basically unblock myself towards that path of success that I was looking for. And I think what I realized early on was that there is this gap that needs to be filled, and no one else is going to do it. So I can either sit around and wait for someone else to come in, or I can just start doing and making things happen on my own. So I think I got really excited. I had a friend as well who, at least in my first year of my startup journey, he was with me, and with him, I think we both kept on motivating each other, and we tried to make things happen. But eventually, when things were not working out, there were definitely days where we thought, okay, it's not working out. We are not making money. Every at the end of the month, our peers will be getting their salary checks and their salaries increasing and they're getting promotions and whatnot, right? And over the next few months, we will be seeing them, either going out, of Pakistan for their career pursuits or whatnot, right? So you will see, you have that to compare with. And as a young startup founder, you will not have the resources to actually do any of that. The other main point that I made was that for a lot of people, it depends from person to person, but usually, some people get into a habit of still relying on their family money to survive their lifestyle and whatnot. I remember I made it a point that I had already committed to my father that after graduation, I'm not going to take any money from you. And steadfast on that promise, like despite the fact that if I was making money or if I was not making money, and sure enough I was still living with him, so my most of my expenses were getting covered anyway. But for my personal things, like in that process I ended up buying my first car. In that process I ended up going on and doing trips to Lahore and Karachi and all these places, and all of that happened on my own. I didn't have to ask for money from my father for that. So I was able to keep myself afloat. But there were definitely times when I used to consider myself the poorest of the poorest in even my own household. And then all of that happened. But I think it was valuable. It was a good exercise to go through, because then eventually, it gave me the power to deal with any challenges that came my way. So um, when I basically were in the process of launching Meri Taaleem, I had to go through the round of fundraising, and um, I remember things just plan out. So the first investor in Meri Taaleem was someone who, up until today, even I have not met in person, right? So this is one person who's still based in UK. I've never met him before in person. We only talked and we only got connected, and lo and behold, my actually the funny thing is that my father was actually visiting UK, and he ended up meeting him when I was in the process of negotiating funding from him and whatnot. And I think that, like, I feel like partly my father represented me for that deal, because eventually, right after he came back, we had a deal of sorts where he would be investing his money into this. Obviously, as investments go, unfortunately his investment did not plan out. But the good thing was that, there's a lot to learn through that experience. There were relationships formed. Um, there were relationships broken as well when I was not able to produce results. Obviously, my investors would not be happy about it. So there were good times, there were bad times, and all of that happened in between. And I think, like I'm saying, in those early years when you've just become independent of sorts, right? You are now in the professional world. You're earning money, and you're then comparing yourself. Okay, I need to be ahead of my peers, right? This person is there, that person is there. I need to beat them, and all of that. There's a rat race that's going on. So I think eventually that vision of rat race also got broken down, because it's everyone for him for themselves, right? Everyone has their own journey. So that was a big lesson learned. Um, but I think in hindsight, what the biggest learning that I had was that it's one thing to get inspired, and it's one thing to follow your passion and put all your energies in one direction. But sometimes it's better to have a good person who has gone through that journey tell you the lessons that they've already learned, and you should
Yes,
learn from
yes. There's. I mean, I
like the
have.
biggest.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I've also learned over the years, that value of timely advice, the value of mentorship is so much in the entrepreneurial journey, and definitely, I the startup. Sorry, the podcast is definitely about the guest, and I sort of, as a journalistic habit, sort of, I don't tend to, bring myself into it, but I can relate on so many things that you are saying, and I can relate to that. And one thing that I've noticed is that at least your father, your family was on your side. Imagine a middle class guy whose parents don't understand those things. Your father said, your father gave you the permission. He, sort of, he was there. He went to the UK and met that guy, and all that, and And believe me, there are parents, the middle class parents who don't have that education that your father had, who don't have that understanding, and sort of where they can understand their children. Sort of, for a lot of middle class entrepreneurs, their family is not on their side, and that adds to the problem. And at least you
Yeah.
were lucky in in that respect. And moving on, recently, a couple of weeks ago, I wrote a long post on Pakistan startup group about how difficult it is to for the startup founders, and how difficult it is to run a company. And interestingly, to my surprise, I got around 200 plus comments on it, and dozens of sorry, 200 plus likes and dozens of comment on it. And a lot of people said, you are talking about my life. And there are two reasons I'm mentioning this. One is to make a point that startups are very hard, and and a lot of people find it out somewhere in the middle of the journey. I did not know that I will get into deep troubles, sort of, and after, I was already on my journey for 2 3 years. That's when I saw that K2, that in front of me, when I had to scale my company.
Mm.
Before that, it was me and a couple of people. It was all hunky dory. But when it came to scale things, that's when the anxiety, the performance anxiety, the problems, the nightmares start coming. And we will of course talk. We can talk about that. But the second reason I brought that post is that I posted on Pakistan startups, and I've become aware that you were one of the founders of that group. And talk a little
Mhm.
about that, how that group came into being, and what was your intention, and how has that group evolved. Of course, we know that it has got more than 100,000 members, and it is one of my most important group on Facebook. So talk a little about that journey, and who were the founders, and what was the vision like.
Sure. Actually, what happened was that when I was in the first year of my startup journey, and like I said, I realized that there was a gap where we did not have a platform to go to as young entrepreneurs. So we started making efforts towards it. And as part of those efforts, I think one thing that happened was that um, there was a so this UK investor that I eventually had, he and he was talking to me, and then there was another guy who we was talking to, who is another admin on Pakistan startups, Samir Salim. And me and Samir were like, Samir was in Karachi, I was in Islamabad, and then Samir, right at that time, Plan 9 was launching. So Samir was probably part of the first or the second batch at Plan 9. So he was following his journey of launching a startup product and whatnot. And then, as part of that discussion, I think there was this, we got connected to Sean Gibson from UK, from Manchester actually. And I think that relationship was also facilitated by Habib, who was actually, my investor in Meri Taaleem from UK, from Manchester. So Habib connected us with Sean and said that, hey, Sean is exploring setting up a tech incubator in, somewhere in South Asia, and he wants to visit basically and meet all the stakeholders in Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, and then he will eventually end up deciding where that tech incubator should be launched. So we agreed to host him, and lo and behold, Sean arrives in Pakistan, and me and Samir both basically host him, show him around, make him meet different people. Because by that time, we were already meeting all these people in all the places ourselves. And then we thought that, okay, because it's something for the betterment of the ecosystem, we should also um, you know um, basically aid any effort that would help the ecosystem. So this was like when a startup or when just like any foreign company would come in and first evaluate the whole situation in a new country. That's the thing that he was doing. So he was here for understanding what exists today, and what would be the value of doing it, and is there any benefit of doing it as well. So he was actually working as part of the large chain of tech incubators in Europe. And then he came here, we hosted him. And as part of those discussions, we started talking about, okay, what are the small level solutions that we can take over? Because obviously, as part of that, he met government, he met, um, Plan 9. So PITB was obviously there. Omar Saif was heading PITB at that time. He met him as well, and all those people, right? And whatever he got, he realized that things are not there as yet. And this is, I'm talking about 2012, right? So obviously at that time, sure, Plan 9 had started. Sure, there were things like we ended up meeting Raza Saeed of Confis and Parkfields as well as part of that journey and whatnot, right? But despite having some effort around startup and entrepreneurship, it was still not an ecosystem. So obviously, with when he went on and studied India and Bangladesh, which were at least having much more developed startup ecosystems than Pakistan, and then for other reasons that did not happen. But as part of that experience, we started talking about, okay, what could be the small scale solutions that we can introduce, where we can at least in our part contribute to the community. And one of those suggestions was that he said that he and his partner back in Manchester started a group like Manchester Startups, and he suggested, why don't you do that? It's just a basic thing. It's just a free platform. You start doing it, you'll start seeing a lot of people join over time, and then it will become like a place of sorts where you guys get to talk to each other, you guys get to connect with each other on an online forum. And Facebook had already penetrated well by then. So that's when the startup have, basically the Pakistan Startups Group came to light. And I think as part of the journey, we also met Adam Dawood, who is
Okay,
basically
who was the
now
guy?
heading.
Who was the guy?
Uh,
Sorry, I have to interrupt. Who was the guy who logged into his Facebook and created that page?
oh, so interesting enough, this was Sean. So Sean created the group
Oh,
and added three of us as co-admins right
and
then
who
and
were
there.
these
So
three
to this,
people? Who were these three people? Samir, you,
it
and
was,
Adam.
yeah, me, Adam Dawood, and Samir Salim. So like we three were added. And to this date, Sean is still part of the group because he is the original creator. He can't be kicked out of the group even though he wants to. So so that's how Pakistan Startups Group happened. I think over the years it grew organically. Honestly, we at that stage when we were launching it, we only wanted a platform for everyone to get connected. And what we ended up doing was we started adding people that we knew. So we ended up adding people like Jahara, Khurram Zafar, Zartash from Lums, Raza Saeed, all the nice people, everyone, right? Salim, Khori, and the Monis Rahman and all these people who are the hotshots of IT industry still to this date, right? So we started adding them. And I think their following brought a lot of people for sure in the group. But then it became a point where obviously these people being busy that they are, and the group started much and much bigger. So there were a lot of, obviously when you have lots and lots of people join in, and this is the time when everyone started creating groups for marketing purposes and spamming groups as well for the same reason. So obviously we suffered from that as well. So these people then ended up limiting their role into the group and their activity. But at least as part of that, that was a starting point, and where now it's growing organically. It became to a point where we had to add more admins. We had to create a whole new moderation team, and they are the ones who are currently running the platform. We still, as admins group and as moderation groups, we sometimes meet. We try to talk about the bigger future of what that group should be doing. And lately, we have realized that there is a lot that can be done to just increase the quality of the content in that group and whatnot. But I think it's just the fact that because no one owned it, it became like a community project of sorts. So now it is at a stage where it's looking for someone to come in and own it holistically and take it forward. And we're actually looking for people who can come in and help us do it, because everyone in as part of that team is already occupied with a lot of things on their plate, which is why it's hard for any single person to step up and sort of take the lead. And that's why we are like right now a little bit suffering because of that. But at the same time, we are trying to make a conscious effort to like we've been offered to get acquired, we've been offered to get bought out, we've been offered to, okay, how many money you will take for monetary, campaigns and whatnot. And we are not doing any of that because this started as a not-for-profit community group, and we wanted to continue like that. But because of that, because there is no, because everyone is busy as well, and there is no central person coming in and owning it, I think we're also slowing down a little bit. But I think we are already on track. We're trying to make or take steps. So hopefully in a few months, inshallah, we're hoping that things will get better.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. You can get volunteers. I mean, even I would be interested to be part of that, part of that team who can sort of, meet and discuss the strategy and make the rules. And, maybe it's time, I believe it's time to write a democratic constitution for the group, because the group has become so huge. It's the main startup group in Pakistan, and I see a lot of quality discussions going there. And I think it's about time that you have a democratic constitution, the rules of the games there. And I brought to your notice earlier on that there was an incident, sort of, there was a post on the startup group. And and the reason I'm mentioning it, is to have your opinion on it. And details don't really matter. But what happened was, one day I saw, a post where, startup group's logo was, with side by side with a startup on a graphic, sort of an indication that, startup group Pakistan startup group was sort of collaborating, or, endorsing a startup. And, that sort of felt to me was sort of, because I am attached to that group, and I think it's a democratic space, or it should be a democratic space where the group itself does not take sides, and that was my opinion. And I want your take on it. And I obviously commented on that. And on that post, my reaction was, I said, are you guys taking money to sort of, show yourself associated with some startup? Or are you guys taking money? If you are open to taking money, let us know, because I want to advertise myself. And also I sort of, I asked those questions. And I said, if you guys are taking money, you should be upfront about it. If you are not taking money, then what is your criteria of collaboration? I sort of made, sort of, my whole point was that, the group should not have its logo with some other startup's logo and make a graphic and post it from an admin of the group. And what's your take on that?
So I can speak on behalf of the group and say that we have not ever taken a single penny from anyone to support any startup, any endorsement, any campaign that happens in the group or anything like that. I think the only time when we have actually collaborated with someone is when we feel like that collaboration leads to um, two things. One is our mandate or objective to help young entrepreneurs, young startups get launched. So if them partnering with us, and they are, find bunch of people that we know or at least trust, or at least one of the admins knows them personally and can speak for them and vouch for them, that's when we would end up, at least allowing them to post about themselves in the group. That happened like 3 years ago and all of that. But right now, that's not even happening anymore because we have consciously tried to disable any sort of advertising, whatnot. The other reason why we might have collaborated with some initiatives is because we feel like the work that they are doing is in the greater interest of the ecosystem. So other than these two things, we have always made a conscious effort to never even get persuaded by any such campaigns. A lot of people, like I said, a lot of people have asked us to either get money for running their paid campaigns and advertisements and whatnot. And at some point, we actually thought of doing it just for the fact that if we wanted to grow this as a community group, and there is some way of making money so that we can actually maybe incentivize our moderators or volunteers who are working with us in the interest of the community, we should probably take it. And we have had talks about it within the admin groups and whatnot. But up until now, we haven't taken any concrete actions on this because the only reason we would, or the only time when we would do such a thing is when we have, like you said, that, for lack of a better word, either a constitution or a plan of sorts where we know who's dealing with what. We have a, board of sorts who is responsible for the group and everything, and they are the people who can be identified, right? So for example, right now you would see very least amount of posts coming from the admins themselves. We try to stay behind the curtain. We don't want to come in front. We could have used this for personal gain, right? We could have advertised our own startups, our own businesses and whatnot, but we are not doing it. And we are not allowed to do it. Like we keep a check on each other. If any one of us wants to post anything in the group, usually they run it by other admins. Hey, I want to post about it. Are you okay with it? Especially if something, if it is something that is going to promote them or their business in some form and shape. And almost always, like, we have made it a conscious effort that we have actually called out and said, hey, this is not allowed, please don't do it, if we have to. And in other cases where whatever they are sharing is harmless and we feel like it can value or it can benefit the community, we allow it. Like we've definitely supported initiatives which wanted to offer a discount or a free service to the group members. We have definitely done that, because as part of that, what we see, yes, you might argue that you're allowing them to freely advertise themselves, but the other side of the coin is that as part of that advertisement, if they are helping out even 5 startups from the group, our business is done. Like that's our objective behind it. That we don't want to, like, we are not getting any PR or any value from this. All we are doing is in the interest of the community, and that's the main idea or main notion, I would say, that we try to follow.
And it's very interesting, some credit needs to be given to your group, because I posted my comment and it was rather critical. I mean, and I can, sometimes post critical comments, and and Samir was replied to that, and he was very calm about it. He said, the question that you've asked is legit, and we are here to explain it. And he explained it, and and a few of my friends, sent me messages. Amir, the group is so democratic. They did not even delete your comment, or you sort of, blocked you. It's a very good tradition that they have upholded, and I am so glad that it happened, because, I've rarely seen events like this. There are a lot of groups in on Facebook run by personal people, 1, 2 people who own it like a private fiefdom, and anything critical, anything out of the sorts, they delete you right away. And in that sense, I was very happy, and and I felt part of that community that cares about my comments, and and try to answer that. And in that sense, my faith in that group was even, enhanced after that experience. And a lot of my friends sort of, reached out to me and said, Amir, this is a great thing. The group is great. These guys are open to critical feedback, and that's a good tradition that is happening.
For sure. I think other cases that we have actually tried to stay impartial and unbiased on is that you might have seen some posts in the past where one party is bashing another party, or something like that. And we have one tried to make a conscious effort to not allow any such posts. And even if at times if we have allowed it, we have stayed out of it in terms of taking sides. What we wanted that to happen, or trigger, is constructive conversation, and we have given complete right to the other party to come in and either debunk or refute their claims or whatever they are saying in that post. And this has happened like many times. Like if it's a straight off, without any context, bashing of sorts, without any constructive element, by doesn't matter who that person was. uh, and we have actually received personal messages, countless personal messages and requests, please allow my message and whatnot, but we have made it a decision that we can't do it. And the only reason why we are doing it is because us as admin group are aligned on this. We don't want to use this group for any personal gain. Like I said, it's there for the community interest. It was launched with that interest, and that's why we never want to take sides. We never want to support anything illegal, anything wrong, or just because someone is paying us or someone is friends with us, we will go on and post their post or allow them. Not at all. And like you said, criticism, we have always taken that with with full grace, mainly because we know ourselves that we are making a conscious effort to help out the community. It's not for ourselves. It's not for any one person, or we don't have anyone behind us that we are trying to please. We are here for the community. We want this to be a safe space for everyone, and that's what we are trying to make happen.
And that is a good example. We talk about, we Pakistani, we are not democratic by nature. We have nepotism, we have other issues, we have, other biases. But, here is an example of an institution, a community of 100,000 plus entrepreneurs and, professionals who are, making an example that we can be democratic, unbiased, and open to criticism, and an open community. So it's a good trend setting that we have done, and it's a good case study of a community in Pakistan by Pakistani people, which is impartial, which is following all the norms of a professional forum anywhere in the world, and that is a good thing. Okay, so I want to move on and talk about your consultancy experience that I know from your LinkedIn that you for a few years you were self-employed as a consultant, and talk about that experience and why were you working and if I and were you like working in Canada and also helping some of the Pakistani companies with your product management services? Talk about that experience as well, and then we will talk about your startup Hopin. But before that, I want your comments on yourself, your self-employment experience. Yeah.
Sure. So when I had to abandon Meri Talim because it wasn't making money, or it was just time to call it quits, there was a lot, like it could still work, but it needed a lot of time and resources to make it happen. I just ended up realizing that it's time to either go on, get a job like normal people would, or start offering my services as a freelancer or as a consultant. So actually, for 1 year after quitting Meri Talim, I actually worked in a company as an employee. But that role was more of a project manager, where I was actually working for a creative agency, and then I was actually looking after their projects and everything else. But after that, I tried, in that 1 year experience, I got the corporate experience of sorts as well, like what happens there and how things are happening. And things were very fine. I still am very good in terms of personal relationships with the people that I work with there. In fact, one of them actually afterwards, I also worked with him on a number of projects between me and him, and we did a lot of good things after that. I think after that I went into consultancy services was for the fact that I just got to know that there is that freedom that's attached to it, and also there is that ability to contribute or add vision to a lot more startups, a lot more products, and a lot more businesses than I would be able to do so when I'm actually limited to a role. So I tried to balance it off between employment and self-employment experiences. In some cases, in some companies, I was actually hired as a consultant. In some companies, I was actually the outside consultant who was providing or working on consulting projects. But it was a mixed bag because I got to work in from all the way from pure IT startups or products to NGOs and creative services and whatnot. And basically, what I ended up realizing was that because I had become I wouldn't say master, but at least a jack of all in terms of everything digital. That's what I started offering to the people who needed my help and my support. In some cases, I would deliver all the services myself. In some cases, I would actually work with someone to deliver the projects that I got assigned. And I also thought that how can I convert this into a full-time career of sorts? But I realized that for many reasons, some of them personal, some of them professional, I realized that I wanted to get a better sense of how things are working in the developed world. And that's when I ended up moving to Canada about 1.5 years back. And since I got here, I had two options. One, either to start, continuing my usual trend of working for someone as a consultant, um, or obviously going on and getting a job. And what I realized was that I'm in a new country. I need to learn the tips and tricks from the people who are here first before I can actually get to a path or get to a stage where I can start leveling with them, or even getting that PR of sorts where I know and I've worked with them and they're able to trust my skills, right? Because it's one thing to know something and claim that you are proficient in. If I say I'm a very good Android developer, any person can test my skills by looking at my past work or my portfolio. But product management is very subjective, and it's done differently at every different company that I've worked in, right? So this is why I think it's important to establish yourself as someone who has a diverse product management experience. And obviously that was not going to be evident by someone coming outside a country. you know no one, like for example, if someone comes to you from, let's say, India, you wouldn't be able to tell if this person is legitimate or not, right? All you will be able to tell is by following their online presence, but that doesn't tell you much, because you're a Pakistani. You may not have a lot of Indian resources to verify that experience with. And the same thing is true in my case when I moved to Canada. So they will only see me as who I am right now, and my experience will start building right now as I work through it. And then once I get to a stage where I'm able to prove myself, that's when I can maybe start thinking about being self-employed again. So that's how I ended up doing it. I think it was a good exercise because, one, it gave me the opportunity to work on diverse problems, which always is good. Like, I feel like the more experience that you have in terms of working on diverse projects and initiatives, the more you learn and the more you're able to groom yourself and add to your own skills. Because if there are people who spend years and years working in one company or one organization. But what I feel like is, even though they might be, after some time, they might be experts in that company and how that company works and how to survive there, and what's the industry and niche that they are working on, they lack on the ability to actually work on other creative problems, unleash their creativity, get to learn from other experiences that they can then start applying in a creative fashion in whatever they're doing, right? So I think I've always tried appreciating diversity. I've always tried doing different things. I've, from launching a web services business to a full scale startup, and doing food delivery for my own self, startup that I created, where I was delivering food, to a very small area, taking orders online and then delivering food afterwards and getting money and getting commission on that. I've done everything. And I think all it has taught me is the value of resilience, the value of perseverance, and as well as the hard work that comes with it. But obviously, the learning itself is very exciting, at least when you're doing it, right? So that's why it keeps me excited and motivated. So that's why I am where I am. Right now, I'm in Canada. I'm working for this company called Hopin, and I can speak to this in a bit. But what I wanted to share was that uh, when I came here, my first company that I worked in was in education because of my experience in Meri Talim. But 3 months later, I was looking for a better job, and I got an opportunity to work in health sector. I've never worked in health ever in my life before, but I was given the opportunity to work in a health sector, and I was very, when I was considering this opportunity, I was very hesitant and very reluctant, because I was like, I don't know anything about health. Like, it's one thing to know about how things work in social media, how web applications work and web systems work and all of that. But, for creating a platform in a healthcare context, it's a completely different ball game. I might know something about education as well because I've worked in that industry, but I know next to nothing about health. And health is something very critical, especially in a country like Canada, where it's certified by and regulated by so many professional bodies and government bodies, actually. So there is no room or margin for error. So I was very hesitant to take up that assignment, but ended up realizing that I was actually good at it when I got into it. It was a good learning experience, and I started doing it and whatnot. And then now I'm at Hopin.
Was it a web product, mobile product, or Internet of Things? What was the startup, health startup, like? What were the
So the health
technology?
startup, yeah. So the health startup was about it's a web platform that connects therapists and people looking for therapy together. So
Yeah.
this was in the mental health context, and even though mental health, you wouldn't necessarily connect to pure health, but it has all the rules applying all the
Oh
same, right?
yeah, oh yeah,
It's
oh yeah.
consultation at the end of the day, medication, prescription, everything else. So it was good learning exercise to see how healthcare context works, not just in Canada, but in general, like what are the things to be conscious about, what is the value that you can add by introducing these digital solutions and whatnot.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But at the same time, it's the same problem like food delivery app. You have to connect buyers with the sellers. But I can understand, you have to have that health sort of, perspective into it. You have to make sure that things are done right because you're dealing with patients and doctors, and there must be ethics involved. There must be rules and regulations that you have to follow, and that could be a topic for another podcast. But I really we have like 5-10 minutes, and I really want to talk about Hopin. And is it a direct competitor to VFairs?
It's actually a competitor to many many tools out there, including the one that we are talking to. So it's also considered as a competitor of Zoom of sorts, but it's not Zoom, right? So uh, as Zoom is for meetings, Hopin is for events, for large scale events. So Hopin is a now known. Obviously, it started off very like it's not in the game for a long time. It started in February last year. So it's only practically 1 year that that company has existed. But in this space, partly thanks to COVID as well, it has grown immensely. Like right now, the last round of funding that we did was at $2 billion valuation, and there are rumors if you explore TechCrunch about Hopin, there are rumors that the investors are chasing after Hopin at $6 billion
Do you own
valuation
some shares?
right now.
Do you own some shares yourself?
Not right now, not right now. But the good thing about Hopin is that they do offer shares to everyone who stays with them for a long time. So I think obviously I'm not there yet because I just joined a few months back. But yeah, people are here who have been here since start. They own some shares. They definitely, I think, as Hopin succeeds and grows, they definitely will have their own share in that success as well.
So talk about within a year, are is it like startups now they have the art has matured so much that now you are seeing startups get up and running and started offering their services within a year, because back in the day it was unheard of. You mostly it took you 3, 4, 5 years or even more, and now we are seeing startups which are up and running and starting offering their services within months. Has something fundamentally changed in the startup world?
Of course, I think as with anything, like for example, let's talk about cars. When the first car was built, it would have been like nightmare for the person who built it, right? To the point where you can actually now produce hundreds of cars in a single day, right? And they will actually be hundreds of cars getting sold in one day as well. So I think it's the same concept that applies here as well. I think it's not just the founders who have perfected the art, but also the investors, and also the ecosystem as in itself has evolved so much that it's now so easy to find solutions to everything that you need. Back in the day, even when I started my startup, and for sure this is back in Pakistan, so where we already still lack a lot of those fundamentals. But even if I would have launched Meri Taaleem, let's say in Canada, I would have gone through lots and lots of things which are now so easy and like a one step thing, right? So for example, when you talk about Canada's government services, everything is online. Same for UK, same for US, right? That changes a lot. That gives you that speed that you're looking for. There are rules, there are agreements. There's everything online that you can just go in and have a look at. And there are so many resources that now that are just basically a Google search away for you. So that changes your speed to launch, no doubt about that. I think that has happened in case of Hopin as well. If you compare it to, for example, how Zoom started. So when Zoom started, they were offering free calls to everyone, right? And then they had to offer it to a long time, including now, where you and I are talking. I don't know about you, but usually at least the standard is 40 minutes are still free, right, on a Zoom call. they still have to follow that freemium model in order to get it because that's their USP. That's how they started off with.
Yeah.
Whereas in case of Hopin, even though the USP is large scale events, their free plan only supports 5 people, right? So that the value itself has become so much that they know for a fact, as Hopin, they know that if anyone wants a 10 people event, they will pay for it. They will not wait for it because the value that we are providing them makes sense. And that's why I think that's why it has given them that boost where something that Zoom achieved in say 5 years, they are able to achieve in 1 year.
Yeah, talk a little about, how do virtual events work? Do you can you see virtual stalls and rooms and all that? What is the definition of a virtual event? How is it different from a Zoom event, for example?
Yeah, for sure. So Zoom is usually typically an event, a meeting, right, where everyone is all together on a screen. Sure, they have a webinar product as well, where there are presenters who are presenting and everyone is listening in as an audience, right? So those are the two major offerings that Zoom has. How Hopin is different is that imagine a large scale conference, let's say being done at Awari Hotel in Lahore, right? Or PC in Lahore. So there is this conference, and what happens as part of the conference? You come in on the front desk, you register yourself, you get your name tag, whatever, and then you jump in, and then there is a schedule that follows, and sometimes that schedule can have parallel events running on the side as well. There are small rooms, small sessions happening on the side, and then there is that main stage where you are and you're looking at what's happening there, right? And then there is an exhibition area as well that happens on the side. What Hopin has done is basically brought all these elements of an event together on one single platform. So in an Hopin event, you will actually go in and you have the ability as an organizer to set up a stage where it's more like a broadcast sort of environment where you have one or two people presenting on the stage, whatever they're presenting with screen sharing and everything else. And then there is a lot of audience who are just in watch only mode. There is a chat that's going on the side, so they can actually talk to each other in the chat. They can leave comments. Everyone, like, the chat is public for everyone, all the people who are attending that event. And then there is a area where you can actually find who are the other people attending this event. Now that changes things because in a normal event, you will be sitting with one people, two people, and you will only be able to talk to them. You will not be able to find other people unless and until you knew where they were or they were coming to that event before. In Hopin now, you can actually see everyone attending that event. And then if you were looking to talk to someone in particular, you have the ability to send them a video meeting invite, share your
So,
contact
so,
details,
so you
and all.
have tried to, so you have tried to replicate that conference environment where multiple events are happening at the same time, and audiences can attend any of those speaking events that are happening, but they can also seek out one other participant and have discussion with them while the events are happening. So
Yep,
it's a multi-dimensional event where you are trying to replicate the experience of a real event, right? And can I,
yeah,
as a participant, set up my own stall as well, and people can write, send me queries, and I can reply to them, and I can even present to them if they, on demand, and so all these are things are possible.
of course, exactly. So we have a expo area that we call where you can actually set up a stall of sorts or a place that's yours to present whatever you want. You can have a pre-recorded thing running there, or you can actually be there yourself live, and you can talk to the people who are coming on and visiting that booth,
Talk
and so on and so forth.
You
So yeah.
talk about a few famous or sort of examples of virtual events that Hopin has run, and that can give us an idea of the application of your service.
Sure. So Hopin has actually done fairly well. Actually, I think there's like I still have to find the top ones, but the notable ones to mention is the UN general meeting. I think that happened in times of pandemic on Hopin. So people from all over the world, including world leaders, like we have had Hillary Clinton, we have had Bill Gates, we have had a lot of other people like that join that session, join that event, and speak to it. We have had TechCrunch conference on Hopin. We have had Postman. If for the developers out there, Postman is a API testing tool and whatnot, right? So we've had the Postman community conference that happened on Hopin, and like the list is endless. Like I think a lot of the big brand names we have had here, and now we are actually entering into a new space where we're actually doing internal events. So these internal events are big enough for example, the organizations that they are created for. So for example, we have a large scale conference going on for a multinational company where people are joining from all over the world. Like Procter and Gamble is in one example, Gap.com is another, and things like that, right? So these type of players are attached with Hopin. They're using Hopin actively, and within this space, the interesting thing that has happened is within the last year, Hopin has actually given rise to this new virtual events industry where now a lot of other people have come in and are trying to sort of challenge Hopin or compete with them. So we have had a lot of new startups launch in this space, some following the same path as Hopin in terms of raising funding and whatnot. And now it's like this year, as Johnny, who's the CEO of Hopin, says, it's like a battleground year for virtual events industry. And Hopin is all geared up. We want to win the battle. We want to be the top leader in the space. And already we are doing good. We just acquired StreamYard, and we are actually
Oh,
acquiring one or two companies as well.
okay.
Yeah,
Two things. So it looks like Zoom is feeling the heat, and that is why they are collaborating with VFairs. Am I right there?
for sure. I think Zoom is definitely keeping a lookout. I would say, and it's not like the thing is, VFairs has been doing something that they have been doing for a long time. It's a mature solution, but it lacks that ability to change their platform so much to tailor to the new needs that we are sort of trying to
Oh,
jump at. So
okay.
that's why I think it's fundamentally important for um, any startup in this space to be lean and adjust to their customer needs as soon as possible, right? So that's what a lot of these tools are all about, because fundamentally offering this ability to connect together. Zoom has been providing that since long. Google Meet came up with their version last year, and all these things exist, right? So it's no longer a problem to have two people connect over a video stream together. It's much more about the experience surrounding that interaction, and how can you make that interactive enough and engaging enough so that people all over the world can still feel part of that bigger event. And that is what all this industry is about, or where it is going right now.
Yeah, it's gonna be
And
very Yeah, it's going to be
yeah,
very
yeah,
interesting. I can see, VFairs, they do have an advantage of low cost of doing business because their engineering is in Pakistan and UAE, sort of, And is that a concern? I mean, does that give a company a considerable advantage if they have engineering in Pakistan, or is it also a problem that some of the top talent might not be available in Pakistan? How do you see that pro and cons of having that dynamics? It does that still, running, having a company engineering and all the resources in North America, is that still a significant competitive advantage in nowadays?
I think it is. So what one thing that Hopin has done right is, for example, most of their engineering team is based in Europe or Eastern Europe. So that is significantly cheaper than hiring people in, let's say, North America, right? So that's one way that they're dealing with it. To that end, they definitely have people from India as well who are joining in. So you know, Hopin is a global company. They don't have a team in a limited location, I would say, and they are remote and global by design. So what that gives us is the opportunity to tap into the top talent all over the world. To that end, we have had people join in from the likes of Salesforce, Facebook, Slack, all these big people, Dropbox, these these type of people are now joining Hopin to build and take us and scale us. Now, what
Okay.
that gives us is the leverage that they bring their experience of working at these big companies. So that's how I think we are able to value that trade-off, I would say. But at the same time, it's definitely advantageous where you can actually recruit from all over the world. You don't have any problems in doing so, and that basically opens up all types of doors for you.
I think it's very interesting that a lot of startups are moving to that model where you are sort of agnostic in terms of time and space, and lately Vigo, I interviewed CTO of Vigo, a travel startup, and they are opening office in Lahore as well. It is opening a lot of opportunities for in terms of the talent, and the wealth will not be concentrated in spaces like Silicon Valley. And if you are good in Lahore or even in small time town of Pakistan, you can have that top line salary and sort of top line experience even operating from your own hometown. So in that sense, the future is going to be very exciting, and it's going to be very interesting, and you won't have, probably it will, I don't know, maybe it will help solve the inequality problem in the world that we are having. Sort of, I'm just philosophizing here, but it's very very interesting. And recently I have moved, in terms of the way I operate, I have sort of gone all agnostic in terms of time and space. I am open to hiring anyone anywhere. I don't care where they work, what time they work, as long as they bring the talent that I need at that particular time. I'm open to it. And I've learned that from companies like Hopin and Vigo and all of that. And you know before we have just last 5 minutes, and is there anything you want to say to the to anyone who wants to listen? Anything that you want to add, or you have any questions for me? And so we have that 5 minutes, and it's up to you.
Yeah, I think I'm not like fully sure who is the intended audience for this or who will be looking at this, but I think I have one word of advice that I want to share with, for example, people who want to or who are already in the process of or are thinking about doing their startups in Pakistan. I would just say there are two times in life where you can actually build something. So one is when you have all the energy in the world but no experience, which is usually the time when you are either in the university or about to graduate. And the other is when you have a lot of experience, which means that you know all the shortcuts, all the hacks, all the right things to do at the right time, but you may not have as much energy, let's say 10 years after you
And a
have
lot more
graduated, or 15 years.
responsibilities, and a lot more responsibilities in terms of family and kids and other engagements, and
Exactly. Yeah. So I think there's no right or wrong answer to it. Unfortunately, in Pakistan, there is still this crazy concept of doing a startup when either you are in the university or right after graduation. What it does not prepare for these people, for these kids is, or what no one else is telling them is that as much as there is a chance of success, there is an equal, or rather not even equal, actually, there is a greater chance of failure. So what happens usually is that I've seen real examples where people who were not able to be successful in their startup journeys were sort of left out on their own because they did not match the for example, they did not have enough experience to be hired by a regular company afterwards. So the regular company did not take them seriously, or they did not find the right opportunity afterwards, and they were like left in a limbo, and this caused a lot of emotional as well as financial stress on them. And I think that is one thing that we should start telling our youngsters, that if you are going down this path, you need to be prepared for the wins and the losses that it comes with. If you are able to afford it, by all means go for it. But if you are not, and if you belong to the normal household in Pakistan, where that in 3 years, 4 years time, you are going to get married, you will have responsibilities, and then at that time you need to be in a place where you're at least earning this much salary and have this much lifestyle available to you, then just try and make sure that you achieve that first. Everything else can follow. It's not like the end of the world that if you don't do a startup right after graduation you'll never be able to. A lot of people do it afterwards, and they're still much more successful. And sometimes I've seen things happen where if you are good enough, even as part of what you are doing, you're able to have that entrepreneurial spirit answered, whether it's by building your own solutions as part of the job that you're doing, or is it by, for example, you coming up with a product that eventually your leadership wanted, or someone liked it and someone invested it at that stage, and then eventually you become an entrepreneur overnight. And you also, by now, because you had a lot of experience, you knew where to sell, where to go, and you were able to be successful very fast. So what I'm saying is, try and keep your circumstances in consideration before you go on and decide if this is for me or if this is not. There's a lot of glamour that has unfortunately got attached to the startup world, which sometimes is actually just, if you just scratch the surface, you will realize it's all fluff. There is nothing of substance in that glamour. So don't get star-eyed by it just because you look at it and you feel like these people are doing so much. Oh my god, they're going on and meeting these people, or they're having dinners in these fancy restaurants and whatnot. That's not what entrepreneurship is. That should be one of your goals, but that shouldn't be your only goal. And if that's the goal that you want to do your startup for, please don't. It's not going to work.
Thank you very much. It's a wonderful advice, and definitely our audience is right now about 100 or 200 people watch my podcast. It's been just my seventh podcast, but most of them are founders themselves, and are really motivated people who want to learn this trade, who want to hear all these stories, and I am building that dedicated audience, and over time, and I will keep on doing that, and definitely it's the right kind of audience. Your message is definitely for the right audience, and all these people, they are either entrepreneurs themselves or are inspired by those stories and want to learn. Even the people who are doing jobs, there are a lot of things to learn, because everybody has, in one way or the other, everybody is an entrepreneur, everybody has some idea, whether in as a startup or as in their personal life, or some passion somewhere. And pursuing a passion, it's same like doing a startup. So everybody, most of the people can relate to it and want to learn about it. And I get a lot of messages from young people who are still in college, and they say, we really thank you, because these conversations are not available elsewhere on the internet. So in that sense, I feel it's a valuable work that we are doing, and thank you very much for for sharing your story and your experience. And I wish you good luck, and I hope we can meet again and do it sometimes again. Thank you very much.
Sure, sure. Sounds good. And thanks, Amir, for doing this. I think it's definitely a valuable thing that you're doing for the ecosystem. I think if not anything, if you're just able to provide the right guidance at the right time to someone, I think you would have definitely delivered a lot more change than any of us can.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I think that is something to be proud of, and for sure something that a lot of other people who are listening and should contribute to. So if today you are listening as a as someone who is benefiting from this advice, tomorrow return that return this to by talking to someone else and giving that advice forward.
Okay, on that good note, thank you very much, Osama, and have a good day.
You too. Thanks a lot, Amir.